The great hall of the northern pack had never been so quiet. Hundreds of wolves stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the tall stone arches, waiting for the woman at the center of the room to speak. Torches burned along the walls, throwing long shadows across the floor, and every eye in the room was fixed on her. Elena stood with her chin lifted, her hands calm at her sides, though her heart pounded so hard she was sure the people nearest her could hear it. In front of her, on a raised platform, stood Damien Voss, the Alpha King. He wore his authority the way other men wore armor, straight-backed and unshaken, but there was something in his eyes that no one else in the room could see. Only Elena recognized it. It was hope. "I claim you as my mate," Damien said, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall. "Before my pack, before the old gods, I claim you, Elena." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone had heard the old stories. Everyone knew that a king's claim, spoken aloud in the great hall, was almost never refused. To refuse it was to insult not just the king, but the entire pack. Elena knew this too. She had known it the moment she walked through the doors. And still, she opened her mouth and said the words she had rehearsed 100 times in her mind. "I refuse your claim." The silence that followed was worse than any shout. Damien's jaw tightened, but he did not move. He did not argue. He simply watched her, as though he had expected exactly this and had already decided what he would do next. "Very well," he said quietly. "Then we will speak privately." He did not wait for her agreement. He turned and walked toward a side door, and the crowd parted to let him pass. Elena stood frozen for a moment, aware of hundreds of eyes now on her, judging her, wondering what kind of woman would humiliate their king in front of the entire pack. She lifted her chin higher and followed him, refusing to let her hands shake. The room he led her to was small and plain, with a single window that looked out over the dark forest. A fire crackled in the hearth, throwing warm light across the wooden furniture. Damien closed the door behind them and turned to face her, and for the first time since she had arrived, the mask of the Alpha King slipped, just slightly, to reveal the man underneath. "You could have refused me quietly," he said. "You chose to do it in front of everyone." "I wanted them to hear it," Elena said. "I wanted you to hear it, in a place where you could not pretend it did not happen." "I have never pretended anything with you," Damien said, his voice low. "You left me," Elena said, and the words came out sharper than she intended, years of buried pain rising to the surface all at once. "You left me the night my family's pack was destroyed. I called for you, I needed you, and you were nowhere to be found." Damien flinched, as though she had struck him. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Elena wondered if he would simply deny it, the way he had denied so many things in the years since. But instead, he walked to the window and stood with his back to her, his shoulders tense. "I know what you believe happened that night," he said. "I have known it for 6 years, and every single day I have wanted to tell you the truth, but I was afraid that even the truth would not be enough to undo what you believe about me." "Then tell me," Elena said. "Tell me now." Damien turned back to face her. His eyes, usually so guarded, were open in a way she had never seen before. "That night, I received a message," he said. "It was carried by a runner I trusted, someone who had served my family for years. The message said that my mother was dying, and that she was asking for me at the old cabin near the eastern ridge. I rode out immediately. I did not stop to think. I did not stop to tell anyone where I was going, because the message said to come alone and to come quickly." Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. "Your mother was not dying." "No," Damien said. "My mother was safe in her bed the entire night, exactly where I had left her. The message was a lie. By the time I realized it, I was hours away from the pack, and by the time I returned, it was already over. Your family's pack had been attacked. Dozens were dead, and you had vanished into exile before I could even reach you." Elena's hands trembled. She had told herself this story so many times, always ending the same way. Damien had chosen to stay away because he did not truly love her, because he was afraid of what loving her would cost him. She had built her entire understanding of him around that one terrible night. Now the foundation of that story was cracking beneath her. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, though her voice had lost some of its earlier sharpness. You could tell me anything now, 6 years later, and I would have no way to prove it wrong." "I know," Damien said. "That is why I brought this." He walked to a wooden chest near the fire and opened it, removing a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age. He held it out to her, and after a moment of hesitation, Elena took it. The parchment was the message he had described, still intact after all these years. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, clearly meant to look urgent and real, but something about the seal at the bottom caught Elena's attention. It was not the seal of Damien's family. It was a seal she recognized from her own childhood, one she had not seen in 6 years, because the man who used it was supposed to have died the same night as everyone else. "This is Corwin's seal," she whispered. "Yes," Damien said. "Your family's most trusted advisor, the man who convinced your father to reduce the night watch on the eastern border, just weeks before the attack, the man who disappeared during the chaos and was presumed dead. I have spent years trying to find proof of what I suspected, and 3 months ago, one of my scouts finally found him alive, hiding under a different name in the Southern Territories." Elena's knees felt weak. She sat down slowly in the chair by the fire, still holding the parchment, staring at the seal, as though it might change if she looked at it long enough. Memories she had tried to bury for 6 years rose to the surface without warning. She remembered Corwin as a kind old man who had taught her how to identify healing herbs in the forest when she was a child, who had sat beside her father at every council meeting, who had seemed as steady and trustworthy as the mountains surrounding their territory. It felt impossible that the same gentle hands that had once bandaged her scraped knees could have set in motion the destruction of everything she had ever known. "He was at my mother's funeral," she said quietly, almost to herself. 2 years before the attack, he stood beside my father and wept. I remember thinking his grief looked so real. Perhaps it was real, once, Damien said. People are not always born as they end up. Something changed in him, or perhaps something was always there, waiting for the right opportunity. I do not know which is worse. Elena did not answer. She simply stared at the fire, watching the flames twist and settle, trying to fit this new truth into the shape of a life she thought she had already understood completely. "Corwin orchestrated the attack," she said, the words feeling strange and heavy in her mouth. "He sent you away so that you could not help defend the pack. He wanted the pack to fall, and he wanted me to believe you had abandoned us." "Yes," Damien said quietly. "He knew that if I were there, I would have fought until the last breath left my body to protect you and your family. He could not risk that. So he removed me the only way he could, by using the one thing he knew would work, my love for my mother." Elena set the parchment down on her lap, her mind racing back through 6 years of grief and anger. She remembered the exact moment she had learned her family's pack had been attacked. She remembered the smoke rising over the trees, the screams that echoed through the night, the desperate hope that Damien would arrive to help, followed by the crushing realization that he never came. She had carried that betrayal like a stone in her chest for 6 years, and now she was being told the stone had been placed there by someone else's hand, not his. "Why did you not tell me this before?" she asked. "Why did you wait until now, until you had already claimed me, in front of the entire pack?" Damien knelt in front of her chair, so that they were at eye level, something an Alpha King rarely did for anyone. "Because I did not have proof until 3 months ago, and because I was a coward," he admitted. "I told myself that if I found you and told you the truth without proof, you would think I was simply making excuses. I told myself I needed to be certain before I came to you. But the truth is, I was also afraid. I was afraid that even with proof, you would look at me and still see the man who was not there when you needed him most." Elena studied his face, searching for any sign of deception, any flicker of the old careful mask. She found none. What she found instead was a man who had spent 6 years carrying his own kind of grief, quietly, without complaint, because he believed he did not deserve to grieve for something he felt responsible for, even though it had never truly been his fault. "I hated you," she said softly. "For 6 years I hated you every single day." "I know," Damien said. "And I let you, because I believed it was easier for you to hate me than to grieve without an answer." Tears rose in Elena's eyes, unexpected and unstoppable. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, walls made of anger because anger was easier to carry than sorrow. Now those walls were crumbling, and beneath them was the same grief she had never truly allowed herself to feel, along with something else, something she had buried even deeper, the love she had never stopped feeling for him. "All these years," she said, her voice breaking, "I told myself I was strong because I had stopped waiting for you. I told myself that moving forward meant never looking back, but I think I was only pretending. I think some part of me was always waiting, even when I refused to admit it." "I waited too," Damien said. "I built an entire kingdom around the space where you should have been standing beside me. My advisors thought I refused to take another mate because I was stubborn, or because I was too devoted to my duties as king. The truth is much simpler. I could not imagine choosing anyone else, not when the one I wanted was still out there, believing the worst of me." "What happens to Corwin?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "He will face judgment before both packs," Damien said. "What he did will not go unanswered. But that is not why I told you the truth tonight. I told you because you deserved to know it, whether or not it changed anything between us. I did not want you to spend one more day believing a lie about the man who loved you." "Loved," Elena repeated. Past tense? For the first time since she had entered the room, Damien's careful composure broke into something like a smile, small and uncertain. "I was giving you an opening to correct me," he said. Elena felt a laugh escape her, unexpected and shaky, the first real laugh she had allowed herself in longer than she could remember. "Loves," she said, "present tense, if you will still have it." Damien reached up and gently wiped a remaining tear from her cheek, his hand steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I have never stopped," he said, "not for one single day." They sat together in the quiet room for a long time after that, the fire slowly burning lower, neither of them in any hurry to return to the great hall, where the entire pack was surely still waiting, whispering, wondering what had happened between their king and the woman who had refused him. When they finally did return, hand in hand, there was no need for grand words or dramatic declarations. Elena walked to the center of the hall, where she had stood only an hour before, and this time she spoke without hesitation. "I accept the Alpha King's claim," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Not because tradition demands it, and not because I have no other choice. I accept it because I choose him, fully and freely, knowing the truth of what kept us apart." The hall erupted, not in murmurs this time, but in genuine celebration. Wolves who had watched her refusal an hour earlier now watched her step forward and take Damien's hand, and something in the air of the great hall shifted, as though 6 years of quiet grief were finally being allowed to heal. In the days that followed, Corwin was found and brought before both packs to answer for what he had done. Justice was served, slow and careful, giving Elena's family's pack the closure they had been denied for 6 years. But for Elena and Damien, the true ending had already happened in that small, quiet room by the fire, where truth had finally replaced silence, and where a love nearly destroyed by betrayal had found its way back to the surface, stronger and more certain than before. Years later, when younger wolves in the pack asked how their king and queen had found each other, the story they were told was not one of a simple claim accepted without question. It was the story of a woman brave enough to demand the truth, and a king brave enough, finally, to give it to her. It was a story about how love, even when buried under years of pain and misunderstanding, could still be found again, as long as someone was willing to dig deep enough to uncover it.